Well, it is the end of another day. I'm out here in the garage enjoying a cigar. Thank you so much for joining me. Tonight, I want to read quite a bit from the book from Senator Josh Hawley, Manhood, The Masculine Virtues America Needs. And I want to start kind of by giving you a little bit of a backstory on what he's talking about. And if you're familiar with the Bible story of Exodus, where the children of Israel are coming out of Egypt. They've been in captivity 400 years, and they finally have been set free, and they've gone out with Moses, and they're exploring. This is after they've gone through the wilderness. They're exploring what's known as the Promised Land. And Moses sent out 12 spies to find out if the land was good. And 10 of those spies came back with a report that said, there are giants in the land. It's terrifying. We are going to be squished. We look like grasshoppers in their eyes. And two of them, Joshua and Caleb, came back with a great report, said, the land is abundant. It's fruitful. Look at the size of these grapes. They are massive. Yes, they're giants, but our victory is going to be that much greater because of what we overcome. Let's go take the land. And Moses and the people decided to side with the 10 instead of the other two. And so they wandered around the wilderness for 40 years. Well, after the end of the 40 years, Moses dies, and then Joshua is the one who is taking up the mantle and leading the charge into the Promised Land after that. And so that's kind of where this story picks up in this book. It's after God has encouraged Joshua to be of good courage. Do not fear. Be strong and courageous. And it says the Bible gives counsel to today's men altogether different from that of the Epicurean liberals. Be strong and courageous, God tells Joshua. In case we missed the point, he repeats the admonition to Joshua 3 times over and punctuates it finally with this promise. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. A man needs strength and courage. He needs the character of a warrior. All of us confront evil in our lives, things that menace us and other people. The appropriate response, the response that redeems, that cuts a path for the light to break in, is not androgyny, but personal, manly courage. Excuse me. Joshua had much to fear. He had the giants and the beasts he knew were there. He had his past. He had spent 4 decades as Moses' number 2, following the great man around, watching, waiting, but rarely leading himself. The reconnaissance expedition he had organized to this very land years before hadn't ended well. His report and counsel had been soundly rejected by the people, the ones he now had to lead in battle. He had much to be concerned about. Every man knows how that goes. The same is true in our own lives always. There are giants of the world around us, our health, our bills, our marriage, our children, and work. These are the giants within. And then there are giants within. Our own wickedness, our bent towards selfishness and strife, our desire to get our own way, and our tendency to do what we must to have it. These are all wild beasts that threaten. Facing these things, facing the ever-present darkness, is not an easy business. Throwing oneself into chaos, into controversy, running toward the monsters of your life requires firmness of mind and will. It requires courage. And courage is rare. True courage is not something men must be educated out of. True courage is a virtue men must be encouraged to acquire. There is a reason for that. Courage runs contrary to our instinct for self-preservation. It runs contrary to our drive to minimize the pain in our lives. This is entirely natural, and the instinct of fear, fight, or flight is no reason for shame. Every creature seeks to preserve its own life. Life is worth preserving. The question is, what does it mean to preserve it? Virtually every other society we know has pushed men forward. Brave men, courageous men, warriors, and soldiers to stand between danger and civilization, even at the cost of their own lives. Why? Because preserving life is not always found in avoiding conflict. And your life is not always the most important one to preserve. Sometimes survival depends on action, on confronting evil, on fighting those who would do us harm. Sometimes survival depends on the aggressive and competitive spirit today's Epicurean liberals want to destroy. Sometimes a man must give his life to enable others' lives to go on. The Greek called a man's ambition and drive thumos, spiritedness. They believed that is what motivated a man to press beyond his merely biological instincts and go to the site of danger. They believed thumos is what drove a man to stand in the face of death, to risk reputation and honor, to brave insult and evil. Male spiritedness was the beginning of courage. Can that spirit be disruptive in the classroom? Yes, certainly. As I have a son, and most definitely would agree with that. It can be very, very disruptive. The ancients knew that too. It is one reason Plato described physical training for young men, discipline of the body to match the education of the mind. Thumos can lead boys to draw pictures of guns and toss imaginary hand grenades. It can provoke fierce competition and the occasional fistfight. But properly channeled, it is the strength of civilization, and we kill it at our own peril. Courage is necessary precisely because life is fragile. We are fragile. We live in the ever shadow of death. Yet that same fragility is what makes courage praiseworthy. It is what makes courage a virtue. In the words of the Catholic philosopher Joseph Piper, without vulnerability, there is no possibility of true courage because there is no need for it. An angel cannot be brave because he is not vulnerable. Piper said, in a similar way, a man who behaves wildly but does not actually risk anything is not courageous. Courage is present only when it costs a man something, when a man confronts the possibility of loss or even death. To be brave, Piper wrote, actually means to be able to suffer injury. And the most praiseworthy kind of bravery is bravery for the sake of good. Any idiot can hurt himself. That is not courage. That is stupidity. Courage risks pain and worse in order to do what is right. This is what male spiritedness is good for. To drive a man to suffer injury, to take a risk for righteousness, to become courageous. As God admonished Joshua, so we should be admonishing men to forsake focus on self and comfort and to seek after courage. Turn toward the giants in your life. Run toward the darkness that threatens your family. Risk injury and harm. Be strong and courageous. As Joseph Piper understood, an injury suffered in fighting for the good confers an intactness of soul that is more valuable than all purely natural serenity. There is a kind of character that comes only by courage. Well, I hope that challenges you tonight. I hope that it encourages you to be strong and courageous. Whatever you're facing, whatever you're fighting, know that it is worth the fight if you are doing it to protect those around you, to preserve that life that you hold dear, whether it be for your spouse, your children, your community. It's worth the fight. And I encourage you and challenge you to keep going. You are not the only one who's in the fight. I know that as I talk to more and more guys around me, I am encouraged by how many of them feel the same way. They feel that something is shifting in our culture, and so many people are rising to meet that call, that demand of us as men to rise up and to make this world a better place for future generations, to not accept just the agenda that seems to be pushed upon us, but to stand up for what we believe in, to stand up for the principles that we have been holding back. We've been silenced for so long, but instead to stand up and be courageous. So I hope that challenges you. I know this was a long read tonight. I appreciate you staying with me. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it if you would consider doing so. If you liked what you heard tonight or anything that you've heard so far on any of the other videos, please share, give me the thumbs up, share on social media. If anything stood out or anything that you want to talk about comes up, please put those in the comments. I would love to have a conversation with you about that. And as always, if you are in the Lebanon area and would like to join me, I would love to share a cigar with you and change the world.